Cops arrested a black doctor in scrubs, then the chief said two words that ended careers. Blood? That could be anyone's blood. What? You think wearing scrubs makes you a doctor? These are the words dripping with contempt from Officer Nathan White as his flashlight locks on the face of a woman who is actually one of 12 surgeons in the country capable of performing the operation a dying war hero desperately needs. In 45 minutes, White will stand before his police chief and hear the two words that end his career, but right now, he is about to make a decision that will cost an American hero his life. The story introduces Dr. Zora Pierce, a cardiovascular surgical legend whose groundbreaking work on complex aortic repairs has made her a titan in medical circles. After a grueling 19-hour shift, she is called back for a critical case, a 68-year-old decorated admiral named Robert Chen who is suffering from a type A aortic dissection, a ticking time bomb in his chest. As she rushes to save him, she is pulled over by officers Nathan White and James Brooks, who see an expensive BMW, a black woman in blood-stained scrubs, and immediately assume criminal intent. 9:42 p.m. The surgeon's lounge at Harbor View Medical Center smells like burnt coffee and antiseptic. Dr. Zora Pierce sits with her back against the wall, still in her surgical scrubs, hands trembling with post-operative adrenaline. 19 hours. She's been awake for 19 hours, and her body is screaming for rest. The triple bypass on the 52-year-old teacher, Mrs. Holloway, mother of 3, had gone flawlessly, but the precision required had drained every ounce of mental energy Zora had left. She's reaching for her jacket when her pager explodes. The 911 code flashes 3 times, each beep more urgent than the last. Before she can process it, her phone rings. Dr. Janet Morrison, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery. Morrison doesn't call unless the world is ending. Zora, we need you here now. Morrison's voice is ice-cold panic, the kind of panic that only comes when death is measuring the distance to a patient in seconds, not minutes. Type A aortic dissection, proximal ascending aorta, 68-year-old male. It's Admiral Robert Chen. Zora's blood freezes in her veins. Admiral Robert Chen. Everyone knows that name. Medal of Honor recipient. 3 tours in Vietnam. Currently serving as senior military advisor to the Secretary of Defense. A man who has stared down enemy fire and survived wounds that should have killed him twice over. But Zora also knows the statistics that Morrison doesn't need to say out loud. Without surgery within 2 hours, the mortality rate for a type A dissection is 95%. Admiral Chen's aorta is tearing itself apart from the inside, and every heartbeat is pumping blood into the space where it shouldn't be. Every second brings him closer to catastrophic rupture. Zora is already moving. Her exhaustion evaporates, replaced by the surgical focus that has made her a legend in cardiovascular circles. She grabs her car keys, her hands no longer shaking. I'm 12 minutes out, she says, and she's running before Morrison can respond. 9:47 p.m. Zora's black BMW cuts through the rain-slicked streets like a blade through water. Her hands grip the wheel at 10 and 2, knuckles white with pressure. She's still wearing her surgical scrubs, navy blue, with dried blood across the front from where she'd leaned over Mrs. Holloway's open chest cavity. Her hospital ID badge swings from the lanyard around her neck, the plastic catching the glow of streetlights as she accelerates through a yellow light. Her pager screams again. She glances down for half a second, ETA. Chen BP dropping. 88:50 seconds. Blood pressure falling. The dissection is progressing. Admiral Chen is running out of time, and so is she. Zora presses harder on the accelerator. The speedometer climbs, 55, 60, 65. Harbor Boulevard stretches ahead of her, nearly empty at this hour. Just a few more miles. Just a few more minutes. That's when she sees them in her rearview mirror, red and blue lights, sudden and absolute, cutting through the darkness like judgment. No. No, not now. Officers Nathan White and James Brooks have been patrolling this district for 6 years. They know every corner, every shortcut, every type of driver who speeds through here after dark. When they see a luxury vehicle doing 68 in a 45 zone with a black driver behind the wheel, their assumptions are automatic. White calls in the plate while Brooks shifts in his seat, his hand already resting on his weapon. Black female, late 30s, expensive car, speeding, White says into his radio. Pulling her over now. Zora's heart sinks as she pulls to the shoulder. Through her window, she can see the officers approaching, flashlights cutting through the rain. Her pager screams again. 9:51 p.m. License and registration. Officer White's voice is flat and authoritative, the kind of voice that expects immediate compliance. His flashlight beam locks onto Zora's face, then travels down to her blood-stained scrubs. Zora's hands are shaking as she reaches for her wallet, but not from fear, from the knowledge that every second wasted here is a second Admiral Chin doesn't have. She forces herself to breathe, to stay calm, to make them understand. Officer, I'm Dr. Zora Pierce. I'm a cardiovascular surgeon at Harbor View Medical Center, and I have a patient dying right now. I need to get to the hospital immediately. She holds up her hospital ID badge, the photo matching her face perfectly. Her name. Her credentials. Everything they need to verify who she is. White barely glances at it. Ma'am, you were going 68 in a 45 zone. Because a man is dying, Zora says, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay composed. Look at me. I'm wearing scrubs. I have my credentials. Please, just call the hospital and verify who I am. Officer Brooks leans down to peer into the car, his flashlight scanning the interior with slow, deliberate suspicion. The beam stops on the blood staining the front of her scrubs. Why is there blood on your clothes? Because I just finished surgery on another patient, Zora explains, forcing each word to come out steady and calm. I'm a trauma and cardiovascular surgeon. I specialize in aortic repairs. The patient I'm being called in for has minutes left, maybe less. Please. Anyone can buy scrubs, White interrupts, his tone dripping with contempt. Anyone can print a fake ID badge. Zora stares at him, disbelief and desperation warring in her chest. Her pager screams again. 9:56 p.m. Zora's pager flashes again. Zora, where are you? Chin crashing. We're prepping but we need you. Her phone rings, the screen lighting up with Dr. Morrison, Harbor View. She reaches for it instinctively, but Brooks barks from behind White, hands where I can see them. Zora freezes, her hand hovering inches from the phone. That's my colleague, she pleads, desperation creeping into her voice. She's calling to verify who I am. Please, just answer it. Just talk to her. White picks up the phone with a gloved hand, his expression unchanged. He answers and holds it to his ear. Dr. Morrison's voice explodes through the speaker, audible even from where Zora sits. This is Dr. Janet Morrison, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery at Harbor View Medical Center. The woman you've detained is Dr. Zora Pierce, one of the nation's leading cardiovascular surgeons, and she has a patient dying on our table right now. You need to let her go immediately. White's expression doesn't change. His voice is flat, dismissive. Ma'am, anyone can make a phone call claiming to be anyone. We have reason to believe this individual may have committed a crime. What crime? Morrison's voice cracks with disbelief and fury. She's wearing hospital scrubs with her credentials clearly visible. White hangs up. The click of the disconnected call hangs in the air like a death sentence. Zora stares at him, her mind unable to process what just happened. He just hung up on the Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery. He just dismissed the one person who could verify everything she's saying. You just hung up on the Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery, Zora says, her voice hollow. Step out of the vehicle, ma'am. 10:04 p.m. The handcuffs are cold against Zora's wrists, the metal biting into her skin. She's standing on the side of Harbor Boulevard in blood-stained scrubs and surgical booties, her pager screaming every 45 seconds. Rain mists down from the dark sky, and a small crowd has begun to gather, people slowing their cars, others filming on their phones. A woman in a Honda pulls over and rolls down her window, her face twisted with confusion and outrage. That's Dr. Pierce. I recognize her from the hospital. She saved my husband's life after his heart attack. What are you doing? White ignores her completely. Brooks is searching Zora's BMW, his flashlight sweeping through the interior, looking for evidence that doesn't exist. Zora is placed in the back seat of the patrol car. Through the metal grate separating her from the front seat, she can see the clock on the dashboard. 10:07 p.m. Admiral Chen has been bleeding internally for 38 minutes. Her mind is doing the math automatically, the way it always does. Blood loss. Organ perfusion. Time to irreversible damage. At Harborview Medical Center, Dr. Morrison stands in the OR gallery, her hands pressed flat against the glass as she watches Dr. Sarah Carter work below. Carter is a competent surgeon, skilled, careful, methodical. But she doesn't have the specialized training for a proximal aortic dissection of this complexity. She doesn't have Zora's hands. Carter's voice comes through the intercom, tight with strain. I'm seeing extensive tearing along the ascending aorta. I'm not sure I can. Do your best, Morrison says, though the words taste like ash. The Admiral's blood pressure continues to drop on the monitors, 82/48. 78/44. At 10:11 p.m., Morrison makes a decision no surgeon should ever have to make. She tells Carter to proceed without Zora, knowing the odds of success are minimal. 10:23 p.m. The 5th precinct is all fluorescent lights and bureaucratic efficiency. Zora is processed like any other suspect, fingerprinted, photographed, her belongings catalogued and placed in a plastic bin. Her hospital ID. Her stethoscope. Her pager, which has finally gone silent. Sergeant Diana Williams, a 20-year veteran with sharp eyes and sharper instincts, looks at the intake form and frowns. She reads it once, then again, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something that makes sense. You arrested a woman in scrubs with a hospital ID for impersonating a medical professional? White shifts his weight, defensive. She couldn't verify her identity. Williams pulls up the dispatch log on her computer, scrolling through the entries with growing disbelief. We got multiple calls from the hospital verifying her identity, she says slowly, her voice carefully controlled. Harborview Medical Center called 3 times. Metro Dispatch flagged it as urgent. Could have been accomplices, White says, but his voice has lost its certainty. Williams stares at him like he's grown a second head. Without another word, she picks up the phone and dials Harborview directly. The line connects on the first ring. Is she there? Is Dr. Pierce there? Dr. Morrison's voice is raw, stripped of all professional composure. There's a long pause, and then, Admiral Chen just died. He died at 10:37 p.m. He died because the only surgeon who could save him was sitting in your holding cell. The words land like a bomb in the precinct. Williams goes pale, her hand tightening around the phone. Around them, other officers have stopped what they're doing, turning to look. Williams sets down the phone with shaking hands. She looks at White and Brooks, and her voice is quiet and lethal. Get Chief Stone here. Now. 10:47 p.m. Police Chief Marcus Stone arrives at the precinct still wearing civilian clothes, a dark suit jacket over a dress shirt, the tie loosened. He was at dinner with his wife when Sergeant Williams called, and the urgency in her voice had sent him out the door without explanation. He's a tall black man with silver at his temples and a reputation for running a tight, reform-minded department. When he walks into the holding area and sees Dr. Zora Pierce sitting on the bench, still in handcuffs, still wearing blood-stained scrubs, his face goes absolutely still. He recognizes her immediately. 2 years ago, his mother had been in a catastrophic car accident, internal bleeding, ruptured spleen, failing vitals. Dr. Pierce had been the surgeon on call. She'd worked for 6 hours straight to save his mother's life, and she'd succeeded. Stone had shaken her hand in the ICU waiting room and told her she was a miracle worker. Now she's sitting in his precinct in handcuffs, and her pager is finally silent. "Dr. Pierce," he says quietly, his voice heavy with something that might be grief. "I am so profoundly sorry." Zora looks up at him. The look in her eyes isn't anger, it's exhaustion. Bone-deep, soul-crushing exhaustion. "Admiral Robert Chen is dead," she says, her voice steady but hollow. "He died at 10:37 p.m. because your officers decided that my credentials, my scrubs, my ID badge, and 3 phone calls from my hospital weren't enough to prove I'm a doctor." Stone's jaw tightens. He turns to Sergeant Williams, who stands nearby with her arms crossed. "Where are they?" White and Brooks are brought into the room. They stand at attention, but there's uncertainty in their eyes now, the first flicker of understanding that something has gone catastrophically wrong. Chief Stone looks at them for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he says 2 words, "You're finished." The following 72 hours are a wildfire. The security footage from the traffic stop goes viral within 6 hours of being released. Millions of people watch as Dr. Zora Pierce, wearing blood-stained surgical scrubs, holds up her hospital credentials and explains that a patient is dying. They watch as Officer White dismisses her ID as fake. They watch as he hangs up on the chief of cardiothoracic surgery. They watch as Dr. Pierce is handcuffed on the side of the road while her pager screams. Admiral Chen's widow, Margaret Chen, a former federal prosecutor with a spine of steel and a voice that commands rooms, releases a statement that lands like a tactical strike. "My husband survived 3 wars and dedicated 50 years of his life to serving this country. He survived enemy fire, torture, and wounds that should have killed him. He did not survive the racism that prevented his surgeon from reaching him." The medical community erupts. The American College of Surgeons issues a scathing statement condemning the incident as a catastrophic failure of basic human judgment. Harborview Medical Center releases a minute-by-minute timeline showing exactly when Zora could have saved Admiral Chen's life, and exactly when that window closed forever, 10:37 p.m., while she sat in a holding cell. Officers Nathan White and James Brooks are not only fired, they face federal civil rights charges for depriving Dr. Pierce of her constitutional rights under color of law. The 5th Precinct is placed under Department of Justice oversight. Investigations are opened. Depositions are scheduled. But Zora doesn't want revenge. Standing in her apartment, watching the news coverage with hollow eyes, she realizes something: punishing 2 officers won't change the system that created them. She picks up her phone and calls Margaret Chen. "We need to talk," she says. "I think we can make sure this never happens again." 3 months later, Dr. Zora Pierce stands beside Margaret Chen at a press conference in Washington, D.C. Behind them is a wall of power: senators from both parties, the Surgeon General, the Attorney General, and Police Chief Marcus Stone, whose department has become the model for the reforms they're about to announce. Margaret steps to the podium first. "Today, we are announcing the Chen-Pierce Protocol," she says, her voice steady and clear. "Federal legislation that will create severe criminal and civil penalties for law enforcement officers who unlawfully detain medical professionals during emergency response. This protocol mandates real-time hospital verification systems that connect directly to police dispatch, and establishes a federal database to track incidents of racial profiling against medical personnel." The Chen-Pierce Foundation, co-founded by Zora and Margaret, has already raised $12 million for bias training in police academies, legal advocacy for wrongfully detained medical professionals, and scholarships for minority students pursuing careers in medicine and law enforcement. Then it's Zora's turn. She steps to the podium, looking out at the cameras, at the reporters, at the faces of people who have been waiting for her to speak. "Admiral Chen deserved to live," she says, her voice steady and unwavering. "He deserved to be saved by the medical system he fought to protect. Instead, he became another casualty of assumptions that said my credentials couldn't be real, my expertise couldn't be genuine, my emergency couldn't be urgent. We can't bring him back. But we can make sure this never happens again." The cameras flash. The legislation passes both houses within 8 weeks. The protocol is signed into law. And Dr. Zora Pierce returns to Harbor View Medical Center, where her skills are no longer a question, but a promise, one the system is finally, legally required to honor.